The air in the Fairfax County courthouse was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and quiet desperation. A woman in a threadbare coat, Poppy Petrova, stood before the heavy oak doors of Courtroom 4B. Her knuckles were white as she clutched two small, restless hands, those of her twin toddlers, Leo and Luna. Inside, her husband, Spencer Montgomery, sat beside his stunning mistress, both draped in designer clothes that cost more than Poppy's rent for an entire year. They were there to finalize a divorce that would strip Poppy of everything. But they had no idea she wasn't just bringing her children. She was bringing a truth so explosive it would shatter their perfect world, all before a judge who saw more than anyone could possibly imagine. The marble hallway of the Fairfax County Courthouse was a cold, unforgiving space designed to diminish the people who walked it. Every footstep echoed, a lonely sound that bounced off the high, impersonal ceilings. For Poppy Petrova, each echo was a reminder of how small and insignificant she had been made to feel. She tightened her grip on the hands of her 2-year-old twins, Leo and Luna. Leo, with his father's serious brown eyes, looked up at her, his small brow furrowed with confusion. Luna, a miniature version of Poppy with wisps of blonde hair, buried her face in the worn fabric of her mother's coat, whimpering softly. "It's okay, my loves," Poppy whispered, her voice a fragile thing in the vast space. "Mommy's here. It will all be over soon." It was a lie, and she knew it. Nothing about this day would be over soon. It was the beginning of the end, or perhaps the end of the beginning. 4 years ago, she had walked into a different government building, full of hope, to marry Spencer Montgomery. He was a rising star in the competitive world of Northern Virginia real estate development, a man whose charm was as potent as his ambition. She was a quiet librarian, drawn to his energy, his promises of a life filled with security and love. The first 2 years were a blur of happiness. They built a beautiful home in Great Falls overlooking the Potomac. Spencer was attentive, doting, and when she told him she was pregnant with twins, he'd lifted her into the air, proclaiming himself the luckiest man alive. The twins were his legacy, he'd said, the future of the Montgomery name. Then Bianca Langley entered their lives. Poppy first saw her at a charity gala Spencer had insisted they attend. Bianca was everything Poppy wasn't. She was impossibly chic, with raven hair cut in a severe, stylish bob, and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She was a senior associate at a rival development firm, and she'd attached herself to Spencer with a predatory focus. Poppy had watched, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach as Spencer's attention shifted, subtly at first, then completely. The excuses began. Late nights at the office, business trips that stretched over weekends. Then came the coldness, the dismissive waves of his hand when she tried to talk to him. The final blow came 6 months ago when he announced he was leaving. He'd already had an apartment in Arlington, a sleek, modern place he now shared with Bianca. He'd also frozen their joint accounts, leaving Poppy with a dwindling savings account and 2 toddlers to care for. His divorce petition was brutal. It painted her as an unstable, unfit mother, demanding full custody of the children he hadn't bothered to see in weeks. He offered her a pittance of a settlement, contingent on her surrendering all parental rights. "It's for the best, Poppy," his lawyer, a silver-haired shark named Mr. Gideon, had told her over the phone. "The children will be raised with the resources they deserve. You can start over." Start over? Leo and Luna were not a rough draft she could simply discard. They were her entire world, so she fought back. She used what little money she had to hire a legal aid lawyer, a young, earnest, but clearly overwhelmed man named David Chen. And she had come here today, with her children in tow because she couldn't afford a babysitter, to face the man she once loved and the woman who had destroyed her family. The heavy doors to Courtroom 4B swung open. A bailiff with a weary face called out the case. "Montgomery versus Montgomery. Custody and divorce hearing." Poppy took a deep breath, straightened her back, and walked in. The room was smaller than she expected, paneled in dark wood that seemed to absorb all the light. Spencer and Bianca were already seated at the plaintiff's table. Spencer, in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit from Savile Row, refused to look at her. He stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, his jaw set in a hard line. Bianca, however, turned her head slowly, a venomous smile playing on her lips. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that probably cost 3 months of Poppy's old salary. Her eyes, cold and dark, flickered down to the twins, and her perfect smile tightened into a sneer of undisguised contempt. The message was clear. You and your messy, inconvenient children do not belong here. Poppy ignored her. She led Leo and Luna to the respondents' table, where David Chen was nervously shuffling a stack of papers. He gave her a weak, encouraging smile. They shouldn't be here, Poppy, he whispered, his eyes darting toward the judge's empty chair. It looks bad. I have no choice, David, Poppy replied, her voice low but firm. She settled the children onto the bench beside her, pulling a small, tattered picture book and 2 quiet puzzles from her oversized bag. They are the reason we're here. Let the court see them. Let their father see them. But Spencer wasn't looking. He was leaning in, whispering something in Bianca's ear. Bianca laughed, a low, throaty sound that was utterly out of place in the solemn courtroom. The sound cut through Poppy like a shard of glass. It was the sound of victory, of entitlement, of a battle they were certain they had already won. A sharp rap of a gavel cut through the tension. All rise, the bailiff called out. An older woman with a severe bun of gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes walked in and took her seat at the bench. She surveyed the room, her gaze lingering for a moment on Spencer and Bianca, then on Poppy, and finally, with a flicker of something unreadable, on the 2 small children sitting quietly with their puzzles. The Honorable Judge Mildred Carmichael presiding, the bailiff announced. Please be seated. Judge Carmichael opened the file in front of her. Her face was a mask of judicial neutrality, but her eyes, Poppy thought, missed nothing. Mr. Gideon, the judge said, her voice crisp and clear. You may begin. Mr. Gideon rose, smooth and confident. Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today to address a straightforward, if unfortunate, matter. My client, Mr. Spencer Montgomery, seeks to dissolve his marriage to Ms. Poppy Petrova. Furthermore, he is petitioning for sole custody of their 2 children, Leo and Luna Montgomery. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, before turning a pitying look towards Poppy. It is Mr. Montgomery's belief, supported by substantial evidence we will present today, that Ms. Petrova is not currently capable of providing a stable and suitable environment for these children. Her emotional state has become erratic. Her financial situation is dire. Mr. Montgomery, on the other hand, is prepared to offer them a life of unparalleled opportunity, stability, and care. Poppy's blood ran cold. Erratic? Dire? He had engineered her financial situation. He had caused her emotional distress. She felt David place a calming hand on her arm. Stay calm, he murmured. It's just rhetoric. We'll get our turn. But as Mr. Gideon launched into his opening statement, weaving a tapestry of lies and half-truths, Poppy felt a wave of despair wash over her. He made her sound like a hysterical, incompetent pauper. He spoke of Spencer's generosity, his pain at having to make this difficult decision, his deep and abiding love for his children. Through it all, Spencer stared ahead, a mask of stoic sorrow on his handsome face. Bianca watched Poppy, her eyes glittering with triumph. It was a perfectly choreographed performance. And in that moment, Poppy knew this couldn't be a fair fight. They had all the money, all the power, and the best lawyer in the state. All she had was the truth. She could only pray that, in a room built on procedure and precedent, the truth would be enough. Mr. Gideon was a master of his craft. He moved around the courtroom with the predatory grace of a panther, his voice a carefully modulated instrument that could convey sympathy, disappointment, and grave concern all in the same sentence. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a storyteller. And the story he was telling was of a benevolent, successful man being dragged down by a clinging, unstable wife. Your Honor, Gideon began, we will present evidence of Ms. Petrova's increasing volatility. We have testimony from a former neighbor, a Ms. Jenkins, who will speak to episodes of distress, shouting, crying, items being thrown within the home during the final months of the marriage. Poppy's jaw tightened. Ms. Jenkins was an elderly woman who Spencer had charmed, bringing her groceries and fixing her leaky faucet. Poppy, meanwhile, had been isolated, dealing with the stress of a crumbling marriage and 2 infants. The shouting was her begging Spencer not to leave, and the item thrown was a single baby rattle tossed in frustration into an empty crib after Spencer had stormed out for the third night in a row. They were twisting her pain into a weapon against her. Furthermore, Gideon continued, gesturing towards a thick binder on his table, we have financial records. Since the separation, Ms. Petrova has depleted her savings. There are multiple declined debit card transactions. She has moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a less than desirable neighborhood. Is this the environment for the heirs to the Montgomery legacy? David Chen shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Gideon is mischaracterizing the situation. My client's financial status is a direct result of Mr. Montgomery cutting off her access to marital assets. Judge Carmichael held up a hand. Sustained. Mr. Gideon, stick to the facts of your client's petition, not your characterization of the respondent's circumstances. You will have your turn, Mr. Chen. Gideon gave a slight deferential bow. Of course, Your Honor. The facts are that Mr. Montgomery has established a multi-million-dollar trust for his children's education and well-being. He has a spacious, secure home. He has enlisted the services of a highly recommended full-time nanny. He is, in every conceivable way, the more suitable parent. As he spoke, Bianca shifted in her seat, placing a perfectly manicured hand on Spencer's arm. It was a gesture of possessive support, a silent declaration that she was part of this new, stable life he was offering. She looked every bit the part of the perfect corporate wife, a woman who would manage a household with the same ruthless efficiency she applied to a business merger. Poppy looked down at her own hands, chapped from washing baby bottles in a cramped kitchenette. She thought of her tiny apartment, which she had scrubbed clean and filled with love, even if it was short on space and luxury. She thought of the sleepless nights walking the floor with a colicky Leo while Luna was teething. Where was Spencer then? He was building his new life, his new image with Bianca. Judge Carmichael was watching them all, her expression unreadable. Her eyes, however, seemed to linger on Bianca. Mr. Montgomery, the judge said suddenly, her voice cutting through Gideon's monologue. Is this woman? She gestured with her pen towards Bianca. Ms. Bianca Langley, your current partner? Spencer was momentarily taken aback. Yes, Your Honor. Bianca and I are together. She has been a tremendous source of support during this difficult time. I see, the judge said, making a small note on her pad. And does she intend to be involved in the children's lives? Should you be granted sole custody? Absolutely, Spencer said, his confidence returning. Bianca adores the twins. She looks forward to being a positive and influential figure in their upbringing. A small, choked sound escaped Poppy's lips. Adores them? Bianca had met them once, a staged 10-minute encounter in a park where she'd barely looked at them, spending more time checking her reflection in her phone screen. Luna, perhaps sensing her mother's distress, began to fuss. She squirmed on the bench and let out a small cry. Mama, up! Poppy's heart hammered against her ribs. This was exactly what she had feared, what David had warned her about. A disruption, proof of her inability to control her own children. She quickly reached into her bag and pulled out a small sippy cup of water and a cracker, murmuring soft reassurances. Luna took it, her whimpers subsiding into quiet sniffles as she leaned against her mother. Bianca rolled her eyes dramatically, a theatrical sigh escaping her lips. It was a small gesture, but it was meant for the judge to see. It said, "See? This is what we're dealing with." Chaos. Mr. Gideon seized the moment. As you can see, Your Honor, even the solemnity of a courtroom is a challenge. A large home, with dedicated playrooms and professional care, is what these children require. He then proceeded to call his first witness, a child psychologist, Dr. Alistair Finch. Oops, that name is on the forbidden list. Let's change it. He called a child psychologist, Dr. Robert Peterson. Dr. Peterson was a slick, well-rehearsed professional who had clearly been paid handsomely for his testimony. He had conducted a 1-hour assessment of Spencer in his pristine Arlington apartment without the children present. Dr. Peterson, Gideon asked, based on your evaluation of Mr. Montgomery and his proposed living situation, what is your professional opinion? Dr. Peterson adjusted his glasses. In my professional opinion, Mr. Montgomery has created an environment that is not only financially secure, but also structured to provide optimal developmental support. He has a clear and thoughtful parenting plan. The stability he offers is textbook for fostering healthy, successful children. And what about the current situation with their mother? I have not evaluated Ms. Petrova, Dr. Peterson admitted, but based on the financial and residential instability described, a child's sense of security could be significantly undermined. Inconsistent environments can lead to anxiety and attachment disorders in children this young. Every word was a carefully chosen dart, and they all found their mark. Poppy felt her hope beginning to fray. They were building a gilded cage of lies around her, and she was trapped inside, watching as they prepared to take her children away. Spencer wouldn't even look at her. He was an actor playing a role. The concerned father, the wronged husband. He had convinced himself of his own fiction. David Chen did his best on cross-examination. Dr. Peterson, you never actually met the children, is that correct? My evaluation was of the parental candidate, Mr. Montgomery. So you have no first-hand knowledge of Ms. Petrova's parenting or her bond with her children? I can only testify to what I have observed, which is a man who paid you a substantial fee for a favorable opinion, David muttered, just loud enough for Poppy to hear. No further questions. It was a small victory, but it felt hollow. The damage was done. The narrative had been set. Spencer was stability and success. Poppy was poverty and chaos. Judge Carmichael made another note. She looked from the smug face of Dr. Peterson to the anxious face of Poppy, who was now quietly stroking Luna's hair as the little girl drifted to sleep on her lap. Leo sat beside them, his eyes wide, watching everything with a solemnity far beyond his years. The judge's gaze was penetrating, as if she were looking past the legal arguments and trying to read the very souls of the people in her courtroom. We will take a 15-minute recess, Judge Carmichael announced, her voice even, and when we return, we will hear from the respondent. As Spencer and Bianca swept out of the courtroom with their lawyer, laughing quietly, Poppy felt a tremor of fear. Her turn was coming. Her turn to fight back with her flimsy collection of truths against their fortress of lies. And she was terrified it wouldn't be nearly enough. The 15-minute recess felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. Poppy led the twins to a quiet corner of the echoing hallway, giving Leo a small juice box and rocking the now sleeping Luna in her arms. David approached her, his face grim. That was rough, Poppy, he said, running a hand through his already messy hair. Gideon is good. He's painting a picture, and right now it's the only one the judge has seen. So what do we do, David? Poppy asked, her voice trembling slightly. How do I fight this? I don't have paid experts or slick presentations. I just have this. From her bag, she pulled a small, worn photo album. It was the only thing, aside from her children and a few pieces of clothing, that she had made sure to take from the house in Great Falls. David opened it. The pages were filled with pictures from the last 2 years. Poppy, her face round and glowing with pregnancy. Spencer, with a genuine, unforced smile, holding his newborn son for the first time. The twins in matching onesies, sleeping in their cribs, birthday parties, trips to the park, messy spaghetti dinners. In every single photo of the children, Poppy was there, smiling, comforting, feeding, playing. Spencer appeared in the first few pages, but his presence gradually faded, replaced by empty spaces at the table and solo pictures of Poppy with the kids. The last dozen pages were just her and the twins. This is your evidence, Poppy, David said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence. This is the truth. You just have to tell it. Speak from the heart. Let the judge see the mother you are. When they were called back into the courtroom, Poppy felt a renewed, if fragile, sense of resolve. She took her seat, placing the photo album on the table in front of her. Mr. Chen, Judge Carmichael said, you may call your client to the stand. Poppy's heart pounded as she walked to the witness box. The wood felt cold and solid beneath her hand as she was sworn in. She sat down, acutely aware of every eye in the room on her. Spencer still wouldn't look at her, but she could feel the heat of Bianca's glare. David began gently. Ms. Petrova, could you please describe your relationship with your children, Leo and Luna? They are my world, Poppy said, her voice soft but clear. From the moment they were born, I have been their primary caregiver. I feed them. I bathe them. I read to them every night. I know that Leo can't sleep without his blue teddy bear, and that Luna gets hiccups if she drinks her milk too fast. I know their favorite songs and their worst fears. I am their mother. Mr. Montgomery's petition claims you are unstable. How do you respond to that? I have been under a great deal of stress, Poppy admitted, refusing to shy away from the truth. My husband of 4 years abandoned our family, cut me off financially, and is now trying to take my children. I would suggest that any mother in my position would be feeling stressed. It is not instability. It is the pain of a mother fighting for her babies. She saw a flicker of something in Judge Carmichael's eyes. It wasn't sympathy, not yet, but it was attention. She was listening. David continued. Mr. Gideon mentioned an incident with a neighbor, Miss Jenkins. Could you explain what happened? Poppy took a deep breath. My husband had just told me our marriage was over and that he was in love with another woman. He left. I was heartbroken, and I was alone with 2 one-year-olds. I was crying. I was pleading with him on the phone. Yes, I was loud. I was devastated. But I never, not once, neglected my children. They were safe in their cribs the entire time. And Mr. Montgomery's involvement with the children over the last 6 months? This was where the photo album came in. David picked it up and approached the witness stand. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this into evidence as Respondent's Exhibit A. He handed it to the bailiff, who gave it to the judge. Judge Carmichael opened the album and began turning the pages slowly. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. She saw the story unfold in pictures. The happy family, then the slowly absenting father, then the mother and children, alone but still smiling. Her expression remained neutral, but she studied each photograph with intense focus. Poppy's voice gained strength as she looked at the album in the judge's hands. Spencer was a wonderful father at first, but as his relationship with Ms. Langley grew, his time with us shrank. In the last 6 months since he moved out, he has seen the children a total of 4 times. Each visit lasted less than an hour. He has never once changed a diaper. He has never fed them a meal. He has never put them to bed. He calls himself their father, but he has been a visitor in their lives. She then produced her own evidence, printed emails and text messages. These are my attempts to arrange visits, she said, her voice steady. Dozens of them. Here is his reply to my request for him to attend their 2nd birthday party. Sorry, tied up with a closing. Here is his reply when I told him Leo had a high fever. Let me know what the doctor says. He didn't offer to come. He didn't even call to check on him. David presented the stack of papers to the bailiff. As Judge Carmichael reviewed them, a deep frown creased her forehead. The carefully constructed image of the concerned father was beginning to crack. Poppy looked directly at Spencer. For the first time, he met her gaze. His eyes were cold, angry. He was furious that she was exposing him. I may not have money right now, Spencer, she said, her voice ringing with conviction, directed as much at him as at the judge. You made sure of that. Our apartment may be small, but it is filled with love and security. Every single day, my children know they are loved. They know their mother will be there for them no matter what. Can you say the same? Can you offer them a father, or just a trust fund and a nanny who will raise them while you and Ms. Langley are busy with your closings and your galas? The courtroom was silent. Bianca was whispering furiously into Spencer's ear, her face a mask of rage. Spencer's facade of calm was gone, replaced by a sullen resentment. But then it was Mr. Gideon's turn for cross-examination. He rose, his expression one of deep, sorrowful disappointment. Ms. Petrova, he began, his voice dripping with condescension. This is all very touching. A lovely story. But let's talk about reality. You have no job, correct? I was a librarian. I gave up my career to raise our children, at my husband's request. But you have no current income, is that correct? Yes. And you were recently denied a credit card application, were you not? Yes. And isn't it true that your landlord has issued you a preliminary warning regarding late rent payment? Poppy's face flushed with shame. It was true. My husband has refused to provide any support. I am doing my best. Your best, Ms. Petrova, is failing, Gideon said, his voice turning sharp. Your best is leading to eviction. Your best is an empty bank account. Love is a wonderful sentiment, But it does not pay for groceries. It does not pay for health care. It does not pay for a top-tier education. Mr. Montgomery is not just offering a trust fund, he is offering a future. You are offering love in a one-bedroom apartment you are about to be thrown out of. The choice for this court should be obvious. He turned and walked back to his table, leaving Poppy feeling exposed and humiliated. He had taken her heartfelt plea and twisted it into proof of her incompetence. The hope she had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by the cold, familiar dread. She had laid her truth bare, and he had simply trampled all over it with the hard, ugly facts of her poverty. She looked at Judge Carmichael, desperate for some sign, some indication of who she believed. But the judge's face was impenetrable. She simply made another note, her expression giving nothing away. The weight of the silence was crushing. Mr. Gideon wasn't finished. He had one more witness, and it was the one Poppy had been dreading the most. The neighbor, Martha Jenkins. Mrs. Jenkins was a lonely woman in her late 70s. Spencer had always made a point of mowing her lawn or bringing over her newspaper, small acts of performative kindness that had won her loyalty. She hobbled to the stand, a frail woman with cloudy eyes looking visibly uncomfortable. Gideon treated her with kid gloves, his voice soft and respectful. Mrs. Jenkins, you lived next door to the Montgomerys for 2 years, correct? Yes, that's right. Lovely young couple. At first. And in the last few months before Mr. Montgomery was forced to leave the family home, did you notice any changes in Ms. Petrova's behavior? Mrs. Jenkins fidgeted with her handbag. Well, there was a lot of noise, crying. The poor dear seemed very upset all the time. Did you ever hear shouting? Gideon prodded gently. Oh yes, quite a bit of shouting. And one evening I heard a loud crash. It sounded like something breaking. Poppy closed her eyes. It was the baby rattle. It had hit the plastic side of the crib. A crash. This was how they did it. They took a kernel of truth and nurtured it into a monstrous lie. And were you concerned for the children, Mrs. Jenkins? Well, a mother in that state, you do worry. Spencer, Mr. Montgomery, he was always so calm and put together. It was a shame, a terrible shame. David's cross-examination was brief. He knew there was little point in trying to badger an elderly woman who genuinely believed what she was saying. Mrs. Jenkins, David asked kindly, did you ever see Miss Petrova harm her children? Oh, heavens, no, she adored those babies. Did you ever see them looking hungry or uncared for? No, they were always dressed nicely. She was always with them. So your testimony is simply that you heard a grieving wife who had just been told her husband was leaving her for another woman, crying and shouting in the privacy of her own home? Gideon leaped to his feet. Objection. Counsel is leading the witness and mischaracterizing her testimony. Sustained, Judge Carmichael said, though her eyes were fixed on Mrs. Jenkins. Mr. Chen, rephrase. No further questions, Your Honor, David said, sighing. The damage, however small, was done. Another brushstroke had been added to Gideon's portrait of Poppy as an unstable woman on the verge of a breakdown. Gideon rested his case. Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Mr. Montgomery offers a life of boundless opportunity. Ms. Petrova, despite her intentions, offers a life of instability and impending poverty. The choice for the children's welfare is unequivocal. The room was heavy with a sense of finality. Poppy felt as if the walls were closing in. She had shared her truth, but it seemed fragile and insignificant next to the mountain of carefully crafted evidence Spencer's money had bought. She looked at the twins. Luna was still asleep on her lap, her small chest rising and falling rhythmically. Leah was looking at Spencer, his expression one of pure, innocent confusion. He lifted a small hand and gave a little wave. Dada, he whispered, his small voice piercing the silence. Spencer flinched. For the first time, a genuine emotion, not anger, but something akin to shame, crossed his face. He quickly looked away, turning his attention to Bianca, who placed a proprietary hand on his knee, as if staking her claim. And that's when it happened. A shift in the room's dynamics. It began not with a shout, but with the quiet rustle of paper. Judge Carmichael, who had been listening impassively, closed the main case file in front of her. She then reached to her side and produced a different folder, one that was thin and unmarked. She opened it, her eyes scanning the first page. "Mr. Montgomery," she began, her voice suddenly devoid of its earlier neutrality. It now held a sharp, steely edge. "I have a few questions for you myself." Spencer and Gideon exchanged a surprised look. This was off script. "You've testified that your primary concern is the welfare and future of your children," the judge stated. "Yes, Your Honor, above all else. And this future is secured by your considerable financial assets, much of which is tied to the Montgomery Family Trust, established by your late father, correct?" Spencer shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, that's correct. I have taken the liberty of reviewing the terms of that trust," Judge Carmichael said, her eyes not leaving his face. "It's a fascinating document. Your father, Robert Montgomery, was a very meticulous man." A flicker of fear appeared in Spencer's eyes. Bianca, sensing the change in tone, sat up straighter, her expression turning wary. "The trust stipulates," the judge continued, reading from a page in the new folder, "that the principal assets are to be managed by a board until you reach the age of 45. The income you draw is substantial, but you do not control the bulk of the fortune. Is that an accurate summary?" "Yes, Your Honor," Spencer said through gritted teeth. "However, there is a clause, Article 4, Section B, regarding legitimate heirs. It states that upon the birth of your first legitimate children within a stable, legally recognized marriage, a significant portion of the trust's principal, 50% to be precise, is to be transferred into a new, separate trust under your direct control for the benefit of said heirs." Gideon was now on his feet. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the details of my client's private financial arrangements are not relevant to this custody hearing." "Oh, I believe they are, Mr. Gideon," the judge retorted, her voice like ice. "I believe they are the only thing relevant to this hearing, because you see, the trust also contains a morality clause. Article 5, Section C. It explicitly states that any act of public scandal, adultery, or fraudulent action that brings disrepute upon the Montgomery name could result in a forfeiture of those rights. The board would retain control. Tell me, Mr. Montgomery, what do you think your father, a man who famously stayed married to your mother for 50 years, would consider leaving his wife and young twins for his business associate to be?" The color drained from Spencer's face. He looked pale, almost ghostly. He was no longer the powerful real estate mogul. He was a little boy who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "This entire proceeding," Judge Carmichael said, her voice rising with controlled fury, "is not about your children's welfare. It's about money. You needed to divorce Poppy, but you couldn't afford a scandal. So you concocted this story. You painted the mother of your children as unstable to secure sole custody, silence her with a meager payout, and ensure the board of your father's trust saw you as the stable parent, thereby releasing tens of millions of dollars into your control." Poppy stared, dumbfounded. The judge saw it. She saw it all. She saw right through the lies, the expensive suit, the rehearsed testimony. She saw the truth, but the judge wasn't finished. She turned her piercing gaze away from the crumbling Spencer and settled it, with the force of a physical blow, on the woman sitting next to him. "However, it seems Mr. Montgomery is not the only person in this room with secrets. Miss Langley, would you please stand?" Bianca looked utterly bewildered. I don't understand, Your Honor." "Oh, I think you will," Judge Carmichael said, a grim satisfaction in her voice as she flipped to the next page in her secret folder. "Because my court investigator had a very busy weekend, and the story he uncovered is even more interesting than Mr. Montgomery's financial desperation." The air in the courtroom crackled with a new dangerous energy. All the carefully constructed arguments and legal maneuvering had been swept away. Judge Carmichael was no longer just a neutral arbiter. She was an inquisitor, and her secret folder was her instrument of judgment. Bianca Langley stood hesitantly, a look of confusion warring with indignation on her face. "Your Honor, I am not a party to this case. I don't see why I am being addressed." "You made yourself a party to this case, Ms. Langley, when you conspired with Mr. Montgomery to defraud this court and strip a mother of her children," the judge said, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "And you did so under a false name." A collective gasp went through the small public gallery. Spencer swiveled his head to look at Bianca. his eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. Mr. Gideon looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "My name is Bianca Langley," she insisted, her voice rising an octave. "I am a senior acquisitions associate at Paradigm Holdings. This is ridiculous." "Is it?" Judge Carmichael leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "According to the birth certificate my investigator found in a small town in rural Ohio, your name is Bridget Larkin. Does that name ring a bell?" Bianca's face went white. The mask of cool, sophisticated confidence shattered, revealing a raw, primal fear beneath. "That's not... I don't know who that is." "Let me refresh your memory," the judge continued, her voice relentless. "Bridget Larkin graduated high school with a less-than-stellar record, moved to Chicago at 19, took a job as a paralegal at a firm specializing in high-net-worth divorces, a firm from which she was fired under suspicion of stealing client data. Sound familiar?" Poppy watched, mesmerized. This was a woman she didn't recognize. The polished, untouchable rival was dissolving before her very eyes, replaced by a cheap con artist. "After Chicago, you disappeared for a few years," the judge went on, consulting her notes. "Then a woman named Bella Laurent appeared in Miami. She became involved with a wealthy hotelier, a man twice her age. Their whirlwind romance ended abruptly when he discovered she had been systematically liquidating some of his smaller assets into an offshore account. He declined to press charges to avoid a scandal, but Bella Laurent vanished." Spencer made a choking sound. He was staring at the woman beside him as if she were a complete stranger. "And then, 2 years ago, a Bianca Langley surfaced in Northern Virginia," Judge Carmichael concluded, her voice ringing with finality. "With a fabricated resume and a portfolio of mysteriously acquired investment capital, she landed a job at Paradigm Holdings, where she quickly identified her next target. A man with a rich wife, a brand new family, and most importantly, a very large family trust he was desperate to control. You didn't just stumble into Spencer Montgomery's life, you targeted him." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the bailiff seemed to be holding his breath. Leo and Luna were both awake now, watching the drama unfold with wide, uncomprehending eyes. "This is slander!" Bianca shrieked, her voice raw and panicked. "You have no proof." "Oh, but I do," the judge said calmly. She lifted a document from her folder. "This is a copy of a wire transfer from 3 months ago. A transfer for $50,000, made from Mr. Montgomery's personal account to a holding company. And this," she held up a second document, "is the incorporation paper for that holding company. The sole director is listed as Bridget Larkin." Spencer slumped in his chair as if his strings had been cut. "She told me it was an investment," he mumbled, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "A real estate opportunity. She said it had to be discreet." "It was payment, Mr. Montgomery," Judge Carmichael corrected him coldly. "Payment for her expertise. She wasn't just your mistress. She was your business partner in a conspiracy. She knew about the morality clause in your father's trust. She learned it from her time as a paralegal. She taught you how to build a case against your wife, how to manufacture evidence of instability, how to manipulate the system to get what you wanted. She was the architect of Ms. Petrova's misery. The only thing she miscalculated," the judge paused, allowing the weight of her next words to settle, "was me." She looked directly at Bianca, or Bridget, her eyes blazing with contempt. "I've been on this bench for 30 years. I have seen every kind of greed and deception imaginable. I know the smell of a manufactured custody case when it walks into my courtroom. Mr. Gideon's arguments were too perfect. Mr. Montgomery's narrative was too polished. And your presence here," she nodded at Bianca, "was a declaration of victory before the battle had even been fought. It made me curious. So I had my investigator do some digging." She closed the folder with a soft, definitive thud. "You preyed on this man's greed, Ms. Larkin, and together you were willing to destroy a family for financial gain. You were going to take these 2 beautiful children from their loving mother and raise them as pawns in your financial schemes." The truth, stark and ugly, now lay exposed on the dark wood of the courtroom floor. Spencer's motivation wasn't love or a new life. It was avarice. Bianca's motivation wasn't love either. It was a cold, calculated con. And Poppy was the obstacle they had tried to bulldoze. Poppy felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of white-hot anger. They hadn't just tried to divorce her. They had tried to erase her. They had plotted to steal her children, her identity as a mother, her entire world, all for a bank account. The carefully constructed world of Spencer Montgomery and Bianca Langley had not just cracked, it had been utterly demolished, and the fallout was about to begin. For a long moment, nobody moved. The silence was a living thing, thick with the wreckage of exposed lies. Spencer sat frozen, his face a mask of utter devastation. He wasn't just facing a lost custody battle. He was facing the ruin of his reputation, the fury of his family's trust board, and the terrifying realization that the woman he had thrown everything away for was a manipulative fraud. But Bianca, or Bridget, was not a woman who accepted defeat. Her fear, cornered and raw, morphed into something else entirely. Pure, unrestrained rage. The transformation was terrifying. The sophisticated veneer melted away, and the vicious creature beneath was unleashed. Her head snapped toward Spencer. "You!" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that carried across the courtroom. "You weak, pathetic fool. I handed you the playbook, and you couldn't even run the play right." Spencer recoiled as if she had physically struck him. "You lied to me," he stammered. "Everything. It was all a lie." "Of course it was a lie, you idiot," she screamed, all pretense of decorum gone. She jabbed a finger, not at Spencer, but at Poppy. "I did it to get away from that. The whining, pathetic little librarian and her screaming brats. You were supposed to handle it. You were supposed to get rid of them." Leo, startled by the sudden shouting, began to cry. His small, frightened sobs seemed to fuel Bianca's fury. "Shut that thing up," she shrieked, her face contorted with hate. "This is all your fault." Her wild eyes locked onto Poppy. "You think you've won? You think you get to keep the money, the life? I will ruin you. You'll be back in that filthy little apartment with your filthy little children, and I will make sure you never see a single dime." Mr. Gideon, looking utterly mortified, tried to intervene. "Ms. Langley, I strongly advise you to remain silent." "You shut up too," she spat at him. "You're all useless." This was the moment she lost all control. The primal, desperate core of the con artist was laid bare. With a guttural scream of pure rage, Bianca lunged. She didn't lunge at Spencer or the judge. She lunged across the space separating the two tables, her manicured nails curled into claws, aimed directly at Poppy and the crying children. "I'll kill you," she screamed, her eyes wild and unfocused. It happened in a split second. David Chen threw himself in front of Poppy protectively. The bailiff, a large man who had been standing impassively by the door, moved with surprising speed, intercepting Bianca mid-lunge. He wrapped his arms around her, pinning her flailing limbs. "You're making a big mistake, lady," he grunted as she struggled against his hold, kicking and screaming obscenities. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Leo's crying intensified into terrified wails. Luna, jolted awake, joined him. Poppy pulled them close, shielding their faces from the ugly scene, her own body trembling with adrenaline and shock. Judge Carmichael banged her gavel, the sharp cracks echoing like gunshots. "Order! Order in this court! Bailiff, remove Ms. Larkin immediately!" "Let go of me!" Bianca shrieked as the bailiff began to drag her, kicking and thrashing, towards the courtroom doors. "He promised me! Spencer, you promised me!" Spencer didn't respond. He sat with his head in his hands, a broken man, as the woman he had dismantled his life for was hauled away like a common criminal. As the doors closed behind the screaming Bianca, an unnatural quiet fell over the room, broken only by the sound of the twins crying. Poppy rocked them, murmuring soothing words, her heart hammering against her ribs. Judge Carmichael surveyed the scene, her face grim. She let the silence stretch for a long moment before she spoke, her voice calm but laced with iron. "Well," she said, looking down at the wreckage of Spencer Montgomery's case, "I believe that clarifies things." She looked at Mr. Gideon, who looked pale and shaken. "Mr. Gideon, given the revelations of the last 20 minutes, including perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, and a violent outburst in my courtroom, do you have anything further to add in support of your client's petition for sole custody?" Gideon swallowed hard. He straightened his tie, a futile gesture of professionalism in the midst of a total disaster. No, Your Honor. The plaintiff withdraws the petition. I should think so, the judge said dryly. She then turned her gaze to Spencer. He looked up, his eyes hollow and defeated. Mr. Montgomery, she said, and now her voice was devoid of all sympathy. You have committed a grave offense. You have abused the justice system. You have conspired to defraud your own family's trust. And you have attempted to use this court to maliciously strip a fit and loving mother of her children for your own financial gain. This is not just a failed divorce strategy. This is an act of profound moral corruption. She paused. The custody petition is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Ms. Petrova will retain sole physical and legal custody of Leo and Luna Montgomery. A temporary child support order will be issued, effective immediately, based on your full documented income from the trust, not your salary. I am ordering you to pay for Ms. Petrova's legal fees, and you will vacate the Great Falls property within 48 hours so that Ms. Petrova and your children can move back into their home. Poppy gasped. Move back home? Furthermore, the judge continued, her voice like granite, I am referring this entire case to the district attorney's office for a potential criminal investigation into conspiracy and perjury for both you and Ms. Larkin. I am also forwarding my findings to the board of the Montgomery Family Trust. I have a feeling they will be very interested in Article 5, Section C. Each word was a nail in the coffin of Spencer's life. He had lost everything. The money, the woman he'd thought he loved, his reputation, and in his greedy, desperate attempt to take his children, he had lost them too. The judge finally looked at Poppy. For the first time, her severe expression softened, and a hint of warmth entered her eyes. Ms. Petrova, she said, her voice gentle, you have endured a great deal. You have conducted yourself with dignity and courage. You are a good mother. Go home and take care of your children. This court will ensure you have the resources to do so. Tears streamed down Poppy's face. They weren't tears of sadness or fear, but of profound, overwhelming relief. She hugged her children tight, burying her face in their soft hair. The echoes in the cold courthouse hallway were finally gone, replaced by the sound of justice. 2 days later, Poppy stood in the foyer of the house in Great Falls. It was strange to be back. The last time she was here, she had been packing a single suitcase in a haze of tears, the ghost of Spencer's final, cruel words hanging in the air. Now the house was silent. He had taken his clothes, his personal effects, and everything related to Bianca. What remained was the life they had built before her, the life of a family. Leo and Luna, who had been overwhelmed and confused by the move to the small apartment, now seemed to recognize their old surroundings. They toddled unsteadily into the large living room, their faces lighting up with pure, unadulterated joy. Leo immediately went to the toy chest in the corner, pulling out the familiar wooden blocks and stuffed animals. Luna ran to the large glass doors that overlooked the backyard, pressing her tiny hands against the pane and babbling happily at the sight of her swing set. For the first time in 6 months, Poppy felt like she could breathe. The crushing weight that had been pressing on her chest for so long had finally lifted. She walked through the rooms, her footsteps sure and steady on the hardwood floors. This wasn't Spencer's house anymore. It was her children's home. It was her sanctuary. Her lawyer, David Chen, had called her that morning, his voice buzzing with excitement. The preliminary child support payment had already been wired to her new bank account. It was a staggering sum, far more than she had ever imagined. The judge had been true to her word, basing it on the full income Spencer drew from the trust, not the paltry salary he claimed on paper. The Montgomery Trust Board has convened an emergency meeting, David told her. Their lawyers are already in touch. It looks like they're invoking the morality clause. Spencer is likely going to be cut off, his future inheritance redirected to a new trust managed solely for the benefit of the twins, inaccessible to him. As for Bianca, or Bridget Larkin, she had been charged with contempt of court, assault, and was under investigation for fraud. Her carefully constructed life was in ashes. Spencer, facing his own legal battles and public humiliation, had apparently left town. He hadn't tried to contact Poppy or the children. It was as if he had vanished, a ghost from a life that no longer existed. That evening, after giving the twins a bath in their own familiar tub and tucking them into their beds in their own rooms, Poppy sat alone in the quiet living room. A soft autumn rain tapped against the windows. She had done it. She had faced the monster and won. She hadn't done it with money or power, but with a mother's fierce love and the simple, unshakable power of the truth. She thought of Judge Mildred Carmichael, a woman who could have easily accepted the polished lies presented to her. But she had looked deeper. She had seen the desperation in a young mother's eyes and the greed in a rich man's heart, and she had chosen to seek justice. Poppy knew she owed that woman a debt she could never repay. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat, but she opened it. "This is Martha Jenkins from next door. I saw the lights on. I am so terribly sorry for my testimony. I was a foolish old woman who was taken in. If you will have me, I would love to make it up to you and your beautiful children. I bake a wonderful apple pie." Poppy smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. She typed back a simple reply. "We would love that. Thank you." She was not alone. She had her children. She had her home. And she had a future that was, for the first time in a very long time, entirely her own. She looked out the window at the rain-washed world, a sense of peace settling over her like a warm blanket. The storm was over. A new day was dawning. Poppy's incredible story proves that the power of a mother's love and the force of the truth can overcome the most daunting lies. In a courtroom designed to favor the rich and powerful, her quiet courage exposed a web of greed and deceit, proving that true justice can prevail when the right person is listening. Her victory wasn't just for her family, but for anyone who has ever felt powerless against the odds. If this story of resilience and ultimate justice touched your heart, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with a friend, and subscribing to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. Thank you for watching.